It's mailbag time! Woo! This is the video where I finally answer some of your burning questions all about painting and decorating. I made a community post not too long ago asking you to ask me anything about the subject that I talk about. And we're gonna go through some of those questions together. And I'm also going to answer a few questions that I handpicked from our comment section because I think the information that I'll be talking about is gonna benefit a lot of people. So why not go through it? All right, I got my mailbag here with me with all the mail. So much mail. And here it is. Here's all the mail. It's on my laptop. I thought that was funny, but anyway, that was funny. Can you give me a quick little like button press and then we can get into these mails? Thank you. All right, the first question we're gonna go through is from Elizabeth. And it's about slanted ceilings. This is a great one. In a room with angled ceilings, slants, dormers, tray ceiling, etc., how do you determine what to paint the wall color and what to paint white? Also, when do you take the wall color right onto the ceiling to minimize the angles? Hope my question is making sense, Elizabeth. It totally is making sense, Elizabeth. It's a question that I've gotten quite a bit, so I'm glad to go through it. Typically in a standard room where you have just 90-degree angles all over the place, white ceilings is the standard. If it's a standard shape room, you go with the standard, white. A reason for that is it's going to be super neutral, super bright, so it's going to help reflect a lot of the light off of the ceiling to help illuminate the space better. The problem is when you have more oblong shaped rooms that are a bit irregular, it's hard to determine sometimes what is the wall color and what is the ceiling color. Some people might think, okay, the flat parts are the ceiling, so paint that white. And then the angled part, that's just the wall on an angle. The problem is when you actually put it into practicality, you can see in these images right over here, it can look a bit messy. You are getting some visual separations that just clutter the whole space, and it doesn't really seem to work very well. My suggestion for a lot of people, it's not going to be for everyone, continue the wall color onto the ceiling. And this works especially well if your wall color is already lighter to begin with. I have heard people suggest, oh, just use a half formula on your ceiling. So take your wall color, cut out half the colorant in it, and then use that on your ceiling. Yeah, in theory it could work, but you don't really know what you're going to end up with when you start messing with formulas of paint companies. It may not be exactly what you're expecting. It could be lighter, could be a bit darker than you thought. It could have different undertones in certain cases. You never know, right? Here's the beautiful thing about using your wall color on your slanted ceilings. The nature of how that room is built. The angles of that ceiling are going to reflect light differently than your straight up and down walls. And what that does is it gives the illusion that the color on your ceiling is different, in a lot of cases, lighter. So you're winning on all accounts, really. You don't have to worry about getting two different paint colors. You don't have to worry about cutting those little edges and all those corners. And you're gonna have a seamless color that has all of its same undertones and hue and all that good stuff. And it's just going to give you a cleaner overall look. Great question. So next we have a question about outdated cabinets. Some DIY kitchen cabinet action. All right. Suggestions on how to paint outdated wood cabinets. Sanding would be difficult due to the intricacy of the trim on the doors. Thank you, Amber, for this question. Here's the thing. You gotta sand, okay? And the reason you gotta sand is because that is the surefire way to make sure you're starting at square one. By getting rid of whatever's on there now and going back to just good old wood, now you know what you're dealing with. You don't want to assume that whatever's on there right now is perfectly good, strong, and it's gonna not peel, because your top coat is only as strong as your base. You could put the most expensive cabinet paint, the most awesome primer ever, but if it's on top of a finish that is just wonky and tired and old and is likely to peel, all that good stuff that you put on top is going to peel with it. My big suggestion is, first of all, clean those cabinets before you sand them. Make sure they're nice and clean. Get rid of all that grime and grease. Then sand them. And you can use a variety of different products. You can use sanding sponges, which help conform to the shape of the surface, which might help you. Or sandpaper, because sometimes you really need to get into those fine little nooks and crannies, and paper will do that a little bit easier, at least for me. And then, of course, priming with a great primer like Super Grip or Sticks, and then top coat with whatever cabinet coat you gravitate towards. Advance, Cabinet Coat, Emerald, Urethane, Scuffex, any of those products, and then just follow the directions. So yeah, gotta sand, I'm sorry. Especially if you want it to last, right? You're going through all that effort, so you might as well, do it proper. So we have another cabinet question. This one is a bit spicy, y'all. This is a big one. So I want to get into this because this is actually a common issue for a lot of people too. So I painted my kitchen cabinets. I sanded them down very well. Awesome. I used a Zinsser Bullseye 123 primer, good product, and then painted with 3 coats of emerald urethane, which we just talked about. That's how many coats it took to cover properly, and it's still chipping pretty easily. I haven't even had the drawers back on the cabinets for 24 hours and they're already chipping. Is this normal? I allowed plenty of drying time, did a light sanding between the second and third coats. I'm at a loss, but I don't want to go through all that work again. Devin, I feel for you. I really do, because I know how tedious and expensive painting your cabinets is. So the fact that it is failing on you is huge bummer. And because I'm not there to actually assess it in person, I can't definitively say what went wrong. I have some ideas. They may or may not apply to you. The first one is in the prep. I see that you sanded it down, which is very great. Something that people miss is the cleaning process before the sanding. Because the kitchen is a greasy place. You cook in it, right? There's gonna be a lot of stuff and grime that can get on your cabinets. Even if you can't visibly see it, it's there. So cleaning before sanding is usually ideal, because if there is that gross stuff on your cabinets, you don't want to sand it into them as well. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you said you put 3 coats and you allowed a lot of drying time. A lot of people will underestimate how much drying time is necessary with products like this. Just because it's dry to the touch doesn't necessarily mean it's ready for another coat. Oftentimes it may even take a week for some of these products to cure. That doesn't mean you need to wait a week to put the next coat on. Really, you just have to follow the label. That's my best advice. If it recommends 12 to 24 hours before recoating, don't do it in 12 hours. Wait for the 24. If you can afford to, wait for 48 hours. Give it the proper time to set, because if it hasn't set and then you're putting a new coat on top, then that foundation is already jeopardized, which is a big problem. And then we get to the chipping aspect here. So I'm curious as to how the chipping is happening. Is it just from regular use? Or are you testing the finish? Because I do find so many people have this fascination with wanting to see how durable a coating is way too early. Just trust that it's going to be okay. Just like your car, right? You're not going to take a quarter and try and scratch off some of the paint to see how durable that coating is. You wouldn't do that to your car. Don't do it to your cabinets. Not saying you did that, but that's something that I see all the time. And the last thing that I want to ask is, what is coming off? What is chipping off? Is it the paint on top that's coming off, or is the primer also coming off? That way you can kind of isolate where things went wrong in the process. If everything's coming off, it's a prep thing. If it's just the paint, it's that top coat. Maybe you weren't giving it enough time to dry in between coats. And that could also be due to weather, humidity, temperature. There's so many factors and variables that can affect these things. What do you do now? Well, assuming that the paint has dried hard, sand and start again, unfortunately. For future reference, I think what could solve the issue a bit is maybe using a water-based lacquer next time. I love using lacquer on cabinets. It just provides you a nice hard finish. The only drawback is you can't really brush and roll it. You have to spray it professionally. So that might be a bit of a bottleneck, but that's what I'd recommend. Next question. This one's a little more lighthearted. Brand loyalty. Is there a reason for staying with one brand throughout the home? Or I personally like sharing the love with all the paint companies, but it does make it trickier on coordinating colors. Angela. I think there is no wrong answer here. Personally, I use a lot of different paint companies. I've used about 4 in my house right now. And also just looking at some of the contractors that I work with. Some painters will be completely loyal to one company. They only use Sherwin-Williams. They love Benjamin Moore. Other painters will be hyper optimized and they'll say, no, if I need a water-based primer, I'm sticking with Behr. If I'm painting matte finishes on the walls, I'm always going to Farrow & Ball. Like, it just depends. Everyone has a different mindset. And it also helps if you have a relationship with a certain store and they can give you discounts and all that. From the color perspective, I don't think that's as much of an issue because color is pretty universal. Red is red, yellow is yellow, beige is beige. There are obviously thousands of variations of them. I guess one of the benefits of sticking with one company's colors is you can look at their website and see the collections they've curated that you can use as inspiration. I say do what makes you happy, always. A trim-related question next. Jimmy asks, hey, I'm wanting to paint my interior all white. Do I need a different type of paint for the trim, or can I use the same as the walls? Yes, Yes, you do. Regardless of the color, whether it's white or black, I always recommend using a different paint on your trim than your walls. You can use the same color, you just have to realize that trim needs a little more washability and durability than your walls traditionally. And the way you get that is with a higher sheen level, a shinier finish. That's why you oftentimes will see matte on the walls and then satin and semi-gloss on the trim, both from the aesthetic side of things, but also the practical side. So not a lot of companies will have a designated trim paint, but normally going with a higher sheen or finish will be much more appropriate for baseboards and woodwork and all that. This one's slightly related. Wall paint on trim. So I painted the walls and trim the same color, only I forgot to use gloss on the trim, just like we talked about. I love the look of the one color, a nice seamless sort of effect. Can I paint this semi-gloss over the eggshell, or do I need to sand it first? So sanding wouldn't hurt. It never really hurts to sand in these sort of situations, just to sort of buff out some of the sheen to get a little bit better adhesion. But traditionally, as long as you've used a standard water-based eggshell on that trim, the same water-based semi-gloss version of that product can go over top. You'll only run into issues if you're trying to put water-based on top of oil. You know, that won't work. But if it's just a matter of the same product and different finishes, you should be okay. If you want to be extra safe, maybe sand it, but I wouldn't. All right, wallpaper paint color coordination. How can I learn the art of combining wallpaper with paint colors and or different patterns together? Sandra, thank you so much for your question. I like to simplify things whenever I can. I apply similar principles with wallpaper that I do with paint. I look at the wallpaper and I try to analyze what kind of colors are happening in there. And then I purposefully lean into either trying to coordinate it with it and pick similar colors, or maybe complement and go a little bit opposite for something a little more dynamic, like an accent wall, for example. So really it's just all about what you're going for. If you're thinking of a wallpaper accent wall, think about what you might do with a paint accent wall. What kind of color would you go with? Would it be darker? Would it be lighter? Would it be more subtle or more dynamic? And then you just sort of build around that. Try and pick out colors from that wallpaper, maybe some lighter variations, and then use that as a wall paint color. Bring a sample of the wallpaper into the paint store and then look at colors there. And then of course, bring those paint colors home as well. So now we're going into some exterior paint colors to finish up. Candace commented, do you have to consider your roof color when you pick your color? I guess she's meaning the color of the house itself, I'm guessing. Yes, you do. Because when you think about it, your roof is part of the overall picture. That's what you can see. I mean, especially your angled roofs, you'll see a lot of it. Normally your traditional shingled roof especially tends to be neutral for a reason. That way you can be a bit more adventurous with the main body color of your home. You can also have those really fun, fiery red terracotta roofs and stuff like that, but normally in those cases, then you just sort of play with the opposite and then go with something neutral and passive and usually lighter on the outside of your home. So when you're picking paint colors, if you want something a little more toned in, then keep the color temperature similar to your roof, or even the hue and the undertones if you want to take it that next step further. Or you can also play the opposites if you want to go for something a bit more complementary. But in either case, it's usually nice to have a bit of contrast between your roof and your house. Lighter house, darker roof is typically the case. My big recommendation is if you can, grab a shingle. Grab a sample when you're picking colors just so you can really compare it and look at them outside, because guess what? Your house is outside. Larry has another exterior question. I'm building a new home, so I now have new ideas. We love that. Question, I was thinking of going for a black door, and I want your opinion on how railing and ONYX will hold up. I think he meant railings. It's a Pharaoh and ball color. Will they fade over time or change color? Thank you. This is a valid concern from Larry because paint that is used outside is exposed to the elements, whether it's UV radiation from the sun or rain, snow, sleet, depending on where you live. The good thing is there are products that are designed to be used outside. And what's built into those products is a lot of handy features that could help prevent things like fading and changing color. In fact, Aura Exterior from Benjamin Moore was actually designed specifically to hold its color for a long time. It's their patented color lock technology. So if you're going with a premium product like that, you're not really going to see any color fading. One thing that you will see kind of no matter what, really, is the finish, the sheen. That is something that could dull over time. And there's not much you can do in that case. The shinier you go, so if you're going with a high gloss finish, the faster you will see that sheen dull. So just keep that in mind. That's something that you can't really work around. But in terms of color, you're good to go, as long as you're going with something like Aura Exterior. Last question, exterior metal doors. This is a cool one. So I'm getting new siding on my house this year. Very exciting. Presently, my 2 metal doors are painted with auto paint, done professionally. Very cool. I've never really seen that done myself, so very fascinated. I want to change the color. Is there a paint I could apply over top that would stick? I'm considering having them redone by an auto body shop as it is so durable. Thank you so much, Julia. Very fascinating. So the easy answer is do what you did before. Like, that is sort of the easiest way, at least from an explanation standpoint. But if you don't want to go that route, what you can do is look into products called DTM, which is direct to metal paint, essentially. So it's designed to go right on metal or primed metal. In fact, that would be my best recommendation. But the option that I would probably recommend, just because I've used these products and they're really nice to use, is priming with sticks, because it's going to stick to anything, even automotive paint, and then top coat with a product called Command. So what's great about Command is it's designed to be a multi-surface enamel. It's going to go on top of a lot of different substrates. It's actually designed for people that work in commercial or even industrial sectors that have a lot of things they need to cover in paint, whether it's metal doors, coated masonry, and of course drywall, even flooring. Like, it does a lot. You can read the label and see all the different things it could be used on. So for a metal door, that would be a great choice as well. It has that sort of industrial vibe to it, which would be very durable and also pretty easy to work with. It's something that you don't need to call a professional automotive painter to do. So that's the mailbag episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other questions that you want me to answer in a future video, let me know in the comment section below. And also, we have more information on Command right over here. It's a fairly new product, but it is awesome. It does so many cool things.